Hey everyone, welcome to Survivor Now podcast. Today, Ollie and I are thrilled to be joined with third runner-up. Is that third runner-up, fourth place?
Yeah, we'll
A
go with
lovely
that.
third, a lovely third alternate.
A lovely third alternate. Zara, thank you so much for being here to talk to Ollie and I. We have had so much fun watching you on your season of Brains versus Bronze 2. We have a lot to talk about today, but it's just awesome that we get to finally see you not on an island.
And I actually get to finally be part of this rather than just listening to you guys every week.
I know. To be fair, I think the highlight for our entire AU coverage was when you posted on your Instagram and we saw you at the beach watching Survivor Now, and we were like, we've made it onto her Instagram. That is what winners. We have won.
Literally, I'm sitting there on the beach at Noosa, with my phone, watching my kids in the water every now and again. You got to get the important stuff prioritized.
Oh, thank you for your support and everything. And we're here. We are here to support all of you as well. Now that you're off of the island, what has it been like getting back to real life?
Yeah, so obviously the finale was 2 or so weeks ago, and that was just a chaotic week. I went down to Sydney for it. So I had my boot out night, which was, I watched it there was the 6 Brains. So there was Laura, Logan, AJ, myself, Karen, and Miles that watched it all together. I had AJ on one side and Karen on the other, which was very fitting.
Yeah.
And then the next night, we obviously had the big finale out at Miles's night, which was just crazy. Lots of people showed up for him, which was beautiful, and some past cast members that I hadn't met before too. So that was really cool for me. I think there's been some photos circulating on Reddit and Instagram, and one with King George, and everyone's, interpreting it and saying, oh, he's saying all this stuff about Zara's game. And I'm like, not at all. It was a fangirl moment for both of us.
Well,
I remember seeing the photos.
You mentioned Karen was there also, and I loved seeing the relationship between the two of you on this season. Can you tell us a little bit about when did you sort of realize this is a good person for me to be with?
So day 2, really. I think we have all spoken about this fact. Really, I think the 12 of us on Brains Tribe, we all got there on day 1, and by day 2, all of us were there thinking we were in serious trouble. We were like, we don't like any of these people. They're all strange. How are we going to find a person to gel with? And somehow, Karen and I you could not pick 2 more different people. I just think, she's this hot Sri Lankan doctor who doesn't want to have kids. She's single, living her best life. And I think my life is like a nightmare to her, married, running around with 3 kids, the full soccer mum lifestyle. And somehow we just had this relationship where we didn't really have to talk that much, and we just clicked. And we were always on the same page, and we could just do things we would look up over the fire at each other and just roll our eyes at whoever was annoying us at that particular time. Or we would just meet up and she'd be like, so it's this, right? And I'd be like, of course it's that. And then that was it. We didn't have to baby each other or go into much detail. And it was great out there because we didn't really have to talk for 24 hours. Neither of us were the person that you had to constantly check on. So it's kind of a relief where you can just leave someone to their own devices and be sure that they're having the same kind of conversations that you're having, and then know that you're just going to meet up and still be on the same page.
Sorry. No, you're fine. Sorry. It's kind of sounded like from the outset, it almost looked like opposites attract. But then as you got to know each other, it was very much oh no, we are the same person. Because if there's one thing I know, if you can connect with someone just by rolling your eyes, that's a good time. That's me and Matthew. Me and Matthew know. We can just look at each other and go, okay, and continue. But I obviously loved seeing your dynamic with Karen. I think seeing it progress and actually seeing how you two were able to kind of anchor in a lot of the decisions was really nice to see, especially during the pre-merge when before swap, when a lot of people may have had those opinions and really wanted to go one way, and you two were very much like, no, this is what we want to happen. Was that kind of something subconscious you two were always going to be like? How did that kind of work? Because we did see quite early on that you and Karen very much stood your ground when it came to the decisions, especially in early kind of Brains tribe.
Yeah, I think so. I think it helps that we had a lot of the same targets. I think the same people were interacting with us in the same kind of way. So in the early days for her and I, Rich and Max, they just saw both of us, I think, as what I would say my son calls NPCs, like just completely just
Wow.
what are they doing out here? You know, they didn't want to interact with us. They didn't want to bond with us. They had their little group, which was the VBs, and they were enamored with Logan and Laura and were going down that path. And we just did not factor in their decisions. So for us, that was sort of an easy path forward. And the only sticking point for Karen and I always was obviously AJ, but I'm sure we'll get into that as we progress down this chat. And it's still happening to this day.
Good to know. You brought up the VBs, and we know from the very early on in the episodes there was once this alliance called the Coven. Can you tell me a little bit more about how strong was this alliance when it was formed, and then when did you realize that this may not be your best path moving forward in the game?
Well, that's one of my favorite photos. I'm going to be putting that on my wall when I get around to decorating. I just love it. I think that the Coven to Karen and I wasn't as important as it has kind of been brought to life on TV. Like, it looked a lot cooler on TV than it did on the island. Even I sort of wanted to be more a part of it, sitting from my couch than I could on the island. I mean, we formed that, and it was very cool because Laura, obviously, you know, she's a white witch. She wasn't sure how she would be received, telling that part of her life, I guess. We received that information with open arms. I was kind of like, tell me more. This is amazing. I don't know any witches in my real life. But Karen and I walked away from that again, you know, with the relationship and dynamic that you guys say that you have. And we kind of went, how long are we thinking that's going to last? 1 vote, 2 votes? Like, it just wasn't really as much of a priority as it has come across. And for us, we had the graduates. So that was always the main alliance for us. And then everything else sort of came underneath it that we were forming.
So, that's really interesting to hear, because obviously we as an audience kind of saw that the Coven kind of just naturally had this, I want to say, unintentional power, because when it came to the decision making, it was kind of always coming down to the Coven, especially in like the first few votes, because it would kind of be a case of like you and Karen, Logan and Laura, but you'd still come together. I'm intrigued to know what it was then, if there's a bit more in depth of when that really kind of fractured, because we kind of were seeing it, and then we saw you move on to the graduates, but it was always kind of this idea of the Coven, and then this like really big shift, if that makes sense.
And so that's not how it played out for us. So when we were on the island, so AJ and Kaylin and Karen and I were a tight 4. And then we could see across, you know, the island, this other batch forming, which was the VBs. And we were at the well, so the 4 of us, and then Miles came traipsing down the path. And he was like, oh, like, you know, what's going on here? And I kind of said, Miles, it's us or them. And he said, oh, I don't even know who us is, and I don't know who them is. Like, explain to me what's happening. And I said, there are 4 over there. We're a 4 here, and we need a 5th to come in power. And so by day 7, that was when Miles had named the graduates. We sort of were like, oh, let's come up with a cool name, because it always works better in Survivor when you have a name.
Of course.
Yeah. There's lots of names on our season, actually. So I think that was always the most important to us. And then the Coven for us came underneath, because it's also just you're living out there. It was super fun vibes for Karen and I to be hanging out with Logan and Laura. Like, it was a great little girl gang. But I think in an alliance, you have to have people who are willing to say yes. And the main problem in the Coven was that we had 4 people and none of them were yes people. We were all driving our own agenda. And you really see that when we all had a boyfriend, as I call it, that we were all kind of closer to. Like, Laura had Rich, I had AJ, and Max and Logan were close. So when we then started thinking about who we wanted to get out, that was when the real problems came, because no one wanted to let go of their male friend.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to do, to get rid of people. You actually kind of answered my next question, which was going to be, how did you know that the graduates / postgraduates were sort of going to be the strongest path to the end for yourself? So thank you for that. But there was also another alliance that I was really excited for, and that was an alliance between, you're going to have to remind me of the name here. I've lost it in my notes.
Girls Gone Wild.
Girls Gone Wild. Yes.
Girls Gone Wild.
Morgan and Kate and Laura. So my question is, what kind of happened here? Because I was expecting you to sort of work with Kate especially, but then all of a sudden Kate became a target.
I think the problem with that alliance was Laura and I sort of saw it when I ended up on that other beach. I had one member of the Coven, one member of the Graduates, Max, who, as I've said, didn't really want to have anything to do with me. So we sort of formed this Girls Gone Wild out of necessity, and because the girls wanted help getting out Jessie. But then moving forward, Laura and I weren't solid enough together to keep this 4 going. So I think that was where the problem came, because as soon as we merged, Laura was going to be straight back over to Logan. I was going to be straight back over to the Graduates. And I would have liked to have drawn Kate and Morgan in. The problem was all of those Brawns were terrified of AJ, because this is when he's going through peak, hostages and this and that. They were terrified of him. That was not the way they were playing the game. They were not that strategy minded. They didn't like chaos. So I thought, there's no way that I can get Kate and Morgan over to work with my other people. I knew that Kate and Morgan had said they didn't really want to work with Karen, and I thought that they wouldn't really want to work with AJ. I was wrong there, obviously. So it just kind of all disintegrated after that first merge vote.
So you've kind of mentioned it there, and I've just written it down because I thought it was quite an interesting fact. Because you said that like the Brawns did not want to play the same way as kind of AJ did. What would you say the main difference was when you looked at your tribe, like your OG Brains tribe, and then the Brawns, in terms of how like each side were playing the game? Because I think we could kind of resonate that there were slight differences in the pre-merge portion, but as a whole, it seemed like people started to kind of integrate in that chaos, shall we say?
Yeah. Well, I think chaos was the word that I was going to use. So you look at the way the Brains were playing when we first hit the beach, it was absolute chaos. Like, we've got major strategists, we've got people who absolutely love the game. We were all running around straight away, like, what do you think of this and what do you think of that, and da-da-da-da. What about it? It was just go time as soon as we hit the beach. And you look at the Brawns, and I liken their experience to kind of Love Island. It was like, we're all best friends and we all love each other and we're all going to be such great friends when we get out of the game. And it was all about camp life and we all had shifts and she's doing fun. And so when we got those 5 over to us, firstly, like, we're exhausted. We're like mentally, it's been mental gymnastics since day one. And they were just cruising. So I think that set us up really well for the second half of the game, because we had just already been playing hard.
Yeah.
I just think they really valued different things. And it did come down to the Brains versus the Brawn. We were out there just going so hard on all this strategy and everything, and they were focusing on camp life and food and shelter. And I mean, you look at the very real comparison of the pig pen that we had cobbled together as compared to when I went over to their camp, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like the Shangri-La. Like, what am I doing over here?
I loved the pig pen. It was great watching. I can understand why you didn't like.
Yeah. So my husband is a property developer, and the whole time I was like, I can feel him laughing at me. He's gonna love this. Be like, this is the best that you can come up with.
That is hilarious. I mean, that must be the reason why you were so eager to get off of that beach. And I mean, we saw this scene. This was a very, we got to talk about this. So now we know, though. Now we know what you were dealing with. Yeah. And also you did sort of find yourself on the minority of the tribe. So you find this clue. Do you remember sort of in more detail what it kind of did exactly say?
I think that was the problem. We didn't read it that well.
That makes complete sense. It's all bad enough.
I think, and you've touched on my state of mind when I went into Tribe Swap. In my head, I'm thinking, I just want to be with the graduates. I just want to be in a majority, and I just want to be on the cushy beach. Like, get me away from this pig pen scenario, get me over the other side. So I got none of that. I had 9 days. Basically, Laura and I have spoken about this, where Laura and I were just talking to each other. Nobody wanted to talk to us. That was what we did for 9 days, was basically just hang out together. And when she got this, advantage, whatever it is, I think it's actually was called a knowledge is power. And all I really remember reading is something, 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 you go over to the other beach. And bearing in mind too, this was moments before we were going off to tribal. There was no chance, people are like, why didn't you go and tell Kate and Morgan about the clue? Why didn't you we had absolutely no time. And when I did read the clue and understand that somebody was going to go over to the other tribe, I said to Laura, I think we should still send Jesse. I think that will be hilarious. We will wake up the next morning. He's going to come traipsing down the path of the other tribe, probably with the flag. Kate and Morgan will be in total disarray because, they'll have seen what's going on. And Laura kept saying, I can't do that to Kate and Morgan. I can't do that to Kate and Morgan. Mm-hmm. And I was saying, we don't need them though. Like, if we do that to them, they're done. Like, they might have to come and work with us because no one else will want to work with them. So, yeah, I think we just didn't really understand the clue or the advantage or the whatever it is you want to call it.
Kind of from what you're mentioning, like from how you're explaining it, it sounds like it was meant to be more of like a secret thing, like they weren't meant to know. But then my brain's kind of looking back and I'm thinking, I swear JLP then announced it, but I can't remember if like you or Laura was just very open about it. Because from how you've described it, it sounds like knowledge is power in a secret form. And then at Tribal, it was just this open-ended secret, which that Tribal was so good. I have to commend you and Laura, because I think both of you did such a great job at like defending your cases in that moment. Do you kind of know more as to why they chose you in the end? Because obviously, as you said, it was kind of like a very last minute thing. So do you know what kind of tipped people over the edge more, or is it kind of just from what we saw of the edit?
I think so. I am actually interested as to whether or not JLP would have announced it, because upon reflection, I'm wondering if it was just sort of like what happened to Rich. Like, was it going to be just, JLP tonight, things are going to be a little bit different and someone's going to go over there? because that would have changed everything. Because when we went into the tribal, Laura was saying, remember, vote for me. So she was going to try and get me to vote for her. She was going to get Miles to vote for her. And I think she wanted to whisper to Kate and Morgan and get them to vote for her as well to send her over. So if JLP had announced it at tribal, it probably would have descended into how it did anyway. And, you know, it wouldn't have burnt my relationship with Laura as much as it did. But when she said that she wanted to go over, I just was like, well, now it's every man for himself. But I think when we were over on Brains 2.0, I formed an excellent relationship with PD. He is a wonderful man, and he and I were sleeping next to each other in the shelter. We were having very long, in-depth chats at night, and he was going to flip over to us, but just not until the time was right. So he would have instantaneously done it, apart from the dynamic between Max and Miles. Because as soon as we got over there, they started on again about Jungle Rat and like even I was like, oh, help me. I can't believe this.
You were like, I'm going to have to listen to this for the rest of the season.
Like, stop. So he was definitely keen to come over our side, but just thought it was too tumultuous. Again, they were just very put off by how chaotic we were. And everyone, all of those, the 5 Brawns had sort of said, we like you best. You're going to be number 6. You'll be the last to go, which I kind of was grateful for, but that's also not a very good position to be in. So I think when I was arguing my case, I was sort of trying to draw on that. Like, remember, you said, I'm going to be, number 6 on the bottom of your Brawny Alliance, and I can go over there. And I'd had separate conversations with each of them about how we were going to proceed in the merge. So with Ben, he had sort of a secret alliance with Ursula where they get up at 12 o'clock every night around the fire and talk. And then once he lost Ursula, he was like, right, let's bring you into that role. So yeah, I mean, that to me, I had a great time arguing that. It was like a mini final tribal council.
Right.
I thought, wow, this is getting me some experience for when I get to top 2.
I have to say that I ended up really liking how it all played out because it was a great Survivor moment where I, as a viewer, was like, Zara, I respect the game, would have hated if it happened to me. Like it's just one of those things that sometimes happens on Survivor. But I am curious, you mentioned the relationship got burned between you and Laura at this point, your game relationship. Were you sort of anticipating that something like that may happen if you went down this path? Like, were you prepared for that?
I was prepared for it. It actually, in the end, I think Laura and I's relationship was recoverable. What it did do was damage Logan and I's relationship beyond repair. Because Logan is a girl's girl, and she was like, I can't believe you did that to my bestie. And I think because of those 9 days that Laura and I had spent together, we knew and know each other very well. And I know she's very strategic and logical, and I thought I'll be able to fix this, and I know that we can do it. It turned out a little bit worse than what I thought it did, and I should have used my wording a bit more, I think, because it's that spread of information where everyone was like, Zara stole my advantage, Zara stole my advantage, and it's kind of like it actually wasn't hers. Yes, she found it. And I also should have said, yes, Laura found it, but it was just a knowledge is power. And I just used that knowledge to my advantage. And, she was going to do the same thing to me. she was out of there like
I was going to say all's fair in that moment. You've kind of touched on your bonds with the Brawns that I really liked hearing that, because that was something obviously we didn't really see. But when I now think back to the edit, I can kind of understand that, because you were kind of always the last name floating around when it came to that group. I'm intrigued to know, when it comes to bonds, was there anyone else that we saw that you had kind of a close bond with that maybe we didn't really see? we know AJ, we know Karen, we know that those are your good times. But was there anyone else? One person I think maybe I kind of want to mention is Kaylin, because if I remember correctly, there was actually a article somewhere, because I actually think you had posted it on your Instagram, because I read it, where that you two were almost like a secret duo. Is that,
Yeah, I mean, Kaylin, I have an 11-year-old son, and Kaylin sort of let me mother him while we were out there. And he called himself Baby K, and I was Mama Z. And then secretly as well, we were the Malcolm and Denise Alliance, which is a US Survivor reference, which Kaylin did not get, but I see that you two are following. So he could never remember their names. So he would just come up to me and be like, oh, so we're the Gertrude and Jack Alliance, or we're like the Beatrix, and just whatever name would pop into his head. And I'd be like, close enough. But yeah, I mean, Kaylin is genuinely what you see on your screen. He is a beautiful man. He's a complicated, intelligent man as well. And he would be walking out of camp like with one sock and no shirt, and I'd kind of be running around after him saying, here's your sock and here's your shirt. And I actually met his mum over in Samoa, and she didn't know anything that would happen, but she came over to me and she said, I'm gonna guess that you were mothering Kaylin and helping him. And I said, yes, I was. And she's like, thank you so much. Like, no problem. I said, I was desperate to meet the woman that produced Kaylin, so very excited to know you. Yeah, I mean, you do form all these really close relationships with so many people out there that just that on screen, obviously there's 24 hours in a day. They're trying to push forward a story. So a lot of it kind of gets missed. And I think too that towards the final four, when I'm making decisions about who I want to sit with, when you can't see those really complicated interpersonal relationships that you've had for 45 days, that's why some of the decision making seems odd.
I mean, that's true. And also just the way that the edit is, the way that it's telling the story of the season also can kind of, make some things happen. I mean, when it came to how close you were with Kaylin, I mean, it sounds like it must have been really hard to even go up to AJ on that final 4 day being like, well, Miles won immunity. We're going to have to vote Kaylin. Is that truly the person that you wanted out at that point, or would you have rather AJ?
I did not want AJ to go at all. And so again, when you're talking about interpersonal relationships, I have kids, 3 kids, and when it hit day 28, for whatever reason, that number of being away from my kids for 4 weeks, I just broke down and cried for about 3 hours. And AJ sat with me on the beach and just listened to me. So he and I were extremely close from day 2 onwards. And at the end there, to his credit, AJ was every single person in the top 5's number 1. He was my number 1. He was Kate's number 1. He was Miles's number 1. He was Kaylin's number 1. So I think, AJ has gone out and played this amazing, big, flashy, strategic game. But what gets lost a lot is how social he was out there. He was phenomenal. He had so much time for everybody. He knew everything about everyone. And we were all so close to him. So at that top 4, I didn't want AJ to go. AJ, for me, I was going to take him to final 2. And I say the plan was to get Miles out at 4. I wanted to win that final challenge. And then it was my intention to take AJ. I hope I would have been smart enough to take Kaylin to final 2 and at least potentially have a crack, because nobody was beating AJ at all. So, yeah.
It seemed like you also, speaking of Miles, it seemed like you wanted him out for a really long time, but it kept going like back and forth. And also I call this the ABBA music video shot. This little
Mamma Mia.
Mamma Mia. You got to walk me through this relationship with Miles because it felt tumultuous just to sort of watch it. Yeah. So I mean, what was your high point with Miles and where was your low point? or many?
Yeah,
We've
there was
got the time. Don't worry.
Yeah. So Miles and I love Miles, and he was one of the most significant people for me out there because he was the player that I was with for the most amount of time. There were those 2 days that I went over to Brawn Beach, but otherwise we were together. So our first meeting was on day one. He came up to me and he's like, "How much do you know about Survivor? Like, what do you know about strategy? Like all this." And I said, look, I know a fair bit. I've watched a lot of American Survivor. I haven't watched a lot of Australian Survivor. And he's like, okay, well, great. Like, stick with me because, like, traditionally the old lady always goes really far in Survivor. And I'm like, who are you calling old? Like, who are you referring to here? So, and that was like a theme that played out through the entire season. Like, every time I was doing well in a challenge, you know, Karen or someone would be like, JLP, the old lady's doing well. You know, Miles called her the old lady. Like, it just constantly came up. So that's a great example of Miles's wonderful social skills there.
Truly. Impressive.
Truly. But yeah, he and I really respect him. He's incredibly intelligent. I think the high points for me were probably actually when I was on the bottom. So when Karen got voted out, and that felt like those boys had ripped my heart out by taking her away from me. Like, I can't describe the feeling when you lose your number one out there. You just feel lost. And he was just really kind to me. He just came over and explained playing from the bottom and how I should do it. And sort of said, look at it as a positive. And those are actually my favorite days out in Survivor from after Karen left until top 4. When you're up, you know, when you've got to make some, you're playing from the bottom, you've got to do everything that you can to survive out there. And the lows for Miles was those 9 days of us together on Brawn Beach. Like, he drove me insane. Like, which we all saw. He did not stop talking.
We have the image.
Yeah.
Please stop talking.
I have to say, Zara, this was the moment. Like, obviously, as you know, you were on my draft, so I was always supporting you. But this moment, like, fell in love because it was just pure bluntness, and it was. I just loved. I loved it.
Yeah,
so, thank you.
You see little bits. So Miles, he loves it, right? He's living for every moment out there. And he wanted to understand the candy vote, like the very first vote. And he went at those Brawns over and over. But I don't understand. And why did this happen? And Kate just goes, Miles, it's not that deep. And he's he can't help himself. And then when we had that pub reward and he gets a few drinks into him, my God, Miles sober is bad enough. But a few beers in, I'm trying to finesse Kate and Morgan and ask like these questions, like, who are you looking forward to seeing over the other side? Miles is just like talking over the top of me. And I think this, and I'm just like, Miles, we've heard enough. And I literally went out of the hut around to this open door and I'm going, shut up. And he just couldn't have cared less. Just
I love that.
What did that do for his threat level?
Pardon?
What did that do for his threat level? Did it make him, like, was he a more dangerous player? Were people overlooking him because of his strat chats?
I think it just heightened his annoyance level in that people were just getting annoyed. And that's a thing too out there. You know, I remember Logan after Merge coming to me and saying, like, we've got to get rid of Miles because we don't want him on the jury, right? Like, we don't want to live with him in Jury Villa. Like, we want to be having cocktails. We want to be on pool floats, like, if we all get there. So I was saying to Miles, you're just blowing up everybody's game. You were giving them every single piece of information about everything. He was saying, all the interpersonal relationships, everything that had happened. And I just was like, please don't do that. You're also hurting yourself. But he thought that that was his way of bonding with them, but couldn't quite see that they were just drawing all this information out of him to use later. But, you know, as he said to me, and how did that work out for you, Zara? I mean, the proof's in the pudding. He was doing something right.
Fair enough. But also in the same breath, you were doing something right as well, because I actually do want to bring up your stats, which we have right here. Like, you came fourth. Like, that is no mean feat. Like, especially in like US in AU Survivor. Like, if we compare AU to US, I mean, no shade.
There's a lot more people to get through.
Yeah,
exactly. A lot more.
So, what would you say was your kind of superpower in the game? Because clearly you had something that got you to that deep in the game that works for Survivor, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think I do think it's relationships, which I think that people will probably scoff at, because I kind of had this, you know, everyone was saying how blunt I was and this and that, and I'm like, but I'm still there. They still want to work with me. So yes, I am very blunt in real life, and it's actually funny seeing it on TV. I understand now why everyone calls me blunt, because I've seen it play out in real life. But despite that, I still did have all the interpersonal relationships that were keeping me there, because Survivor's not an individual game. You need your people around you. And my people wanted me there. They, you know, they wanted to talk strategy with me. I do love the game. I love all the strategizing and thinking about who's going next and talking about paths. And especially when you're playing with people like AJ and Miles, who are on another level of Survivor. You know, you can ask Miles anything. When they started fire out there, when Kaylin made that fire with some of the girls, I said, oh, Miles, how many times in Australian Survivor history has that happened? He'd be like, oh, 3, this and this and this. Like, they're like encyclopedias. And towards the end there, AJ would sit next to me on the beach and he would just draw in the sand all the different paths for everyone. This person can go this path with this person go, like, they are like human computers, just constantly thinking over everything. So I think you have to, when you're playing alongside them, you have to have a certain like understanding and grasp of strategy and wanting to be there and wanting to talk about that. And I'm also pretty good at endurance, and I'm also very bad at throwing things.
I like it. You start with the positive, end on the negative.
Yes, if you're going to get to things that you did badly out there, throwing, I think, and riding barrels, top 2.
Those barrels though.
I hate that barrel. I feel like I still see it in my nightmares.
Listen, but you did. I'm glad we're talking about your endurance. You did win a challenge, and I was so happy. I was like, this was an incredible week for you, Zara. I loved seeing not only you winning this challenge, which very well deserved. If you want, what does this moment feel like to get that necklace around your neck?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those ones where you don't know if you're going to be any good at it, and you have to say it's a lot of luck, because like I couldn't see the top of those blocks. And there was sort of a trick to getting that pole to work, which Miles, I couldn't get it off at the start, and Miles was kind of like, you've got to turn it. So he helped give me advice on that. And for once, slow and steady won, so that was great. And I do have tiny feet that could get through that maze.
Yeah.
But that to me was just a moment. I really wanted to go out there and show my kids that I could do something cool. So that was, a great moment to get that, especially because I didn't manage to find an idol. So this was, a close second.
Wow, yeah.
Also, I mean, Kaylin didn't leave the field very open for the rest of us to win anything. So, yeah.
I was going to say, yeah.
It was so exciting. And then also just to see, you mentioned that just now, you said people wanted me there and people were strategizing with me. And we saw that in this episode, definitely, where people were coming up to you and you were aware of every single vote that was going to be happening at that tribal council. So you did have a decision that you had to make. And that was, were you going to vote out Kate, or were you going to flip things and vote with Miles onto AJ? And I need to say, I loved what you ended up doing.
Mm-hmm.
that being said, we did see, as a viewer, we saw it seemed like the jury was a bit underwhelmed by that move. Is that what it felt like in the moment? And then if so, do you feel that you would have been able to justify it to the jury had you made it to the end?
I think actually, so when I got out in my jury villa, they said, "Why didn't you take out AJ?" And I said, "It wasn't the right time for me." And I think Logan said, "It's always the right time to get out AJ." But you have to look at their relationships with AJ, which is separate to my relationship with AJ.
Yeah.
And I do think the narrative of you watching the show, like, of course, AJ has been built up to be this kingpin, and why would you not take a shot at the king? But that wasn't my experience when I was out there. As I've said, he was my number one. He was everybody else's number one. That's fine. He was my number one. And you have to actually get through to the end. And nobody wanted to take me to that final challenge. No one wanted to take me to 3. So I had a very big hurdle getting there. And AJ believed, and I have told him that was my intention, that if I got to 3, I would take him to 2. So I knew he was going to take me. I did not know if Kaylin would take me, if Miles would take me, or if Kate was taking me. So yeah, I understand that people don't think it was that great of a move, but for me, I was trying to get to where I needed to go to. And also, there were 2 king players out there. There was AJ and Miles. And before we went to that vote, Miles said to me, "I have an idol." I hadn't seen it. So, I mean, I thought he had one. Did I 100% know he had one? No. But if he didn't, I would have taken the shot at him. But because I thought, he had said he had one, and I wasn't going to take the chance, and, as it turned out, yes, he did have another one. I did, in the back of my head, think there's no way that's true, because how could you possibly have had 4 idols? But he did have an idol. So I was taking an inadvertent shot at Miles by destabilizing him, because once AJ realized that Miles had gone for him, if Miles hadn't won that Final 4 necklace, he was done. We had a conversation. Kaylin really respected loyalty, stability. He felt that Miles's gameplay was a bit erratic for him. So, that was my final 3, Kaylin and AJ. I had a plan. I was enacting my plan in what was best for me. And to get AJ out was what was best for Miles, not what was best for me.
I love that.
So I stand.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Ollie and I have been talking about this move. I mean, Ollie, you had a great point about why this was an excellent move for Zara at this point in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I remember saying it on the podcast that this was one of, if not the strongest move of the season, because you, number one, had all of the information. Like, you knew everything that was going on. You could have literally sat there and gone, like, here's how everyone's voting. But then on that, it seemed like you understood the dynamics of where everyone was. Like, again, you've just perfectly stated it there. You knew what Kaylin really appreciated, and you knew that keeping Miles, having Miles there, having AJ there, there would be fractures for you. So I will always commend you for this move, because I think it was a really, really strong move. If I was there, I would have been move of the season, but that's just me.
And the way you explained it to Kaylin and AJ when you got back to camp afterwards, it all made perfect sense, especially with what how you expected them to work with you moving forward.
Yeah. And everything in Survivor is very results orientated. And if I'd have won, I'd look like a genius, because I didn't. Obviously, you have to say that you've made a misstep. But if I had gotten out AJ as well, I'd thought about all the different ways of how things could go. And without AJ there, I had no guarantee that if I didn't win immunity, what's to stop Kate, Kaylin and Miles ganging up on me? What's to stop there being a 2-2 split and me going to fire against Kate, Kaylin, Miles? All of those guys were going to beat me in fire. So, yeah, I just think I did the absolute best thing that I could for myself at that time, and it made perfect sense to me.
Made perfect sense to me as well.
Yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
thank you. But it's like it just wasn't what the audience wanted. They wanted to see AJ out. That wasn't what Zara wanted. So,
but at the end of the day, you're there to play for you, not for the audience, and I always will stick by that. So that's why I say you've made the right decision, because it was best for your game. So.
Yeah. And the chances of Miles winning that Final Four immunity, like, can we just go over that? And Kaylin, AJ, and I had sat down together and we calculated out, we're like, there's about an 8% chance that he'll win. Like, seriously.
Literally.
Yeah.
Let's be fair. Kaylin had won everything. All of those long challenges he was an absolute gun at. And I literally was standing there throwing sandbags, like, left, right, center, up in the air behind me, waiting for Kaylin to win, because I couldn't see what they were doing over there and I couldn't really hear. And then you see that moment where JLP says that Miles won, and I'm just like, oh no. Like, all my plans have just gone up in smoke. So you
of
can't
all things.
Well, you can prepare for that. And I thought there was an 8% chance. And, he pulled it out of the bag. So that was a $500,000 move or win for Miles.
Well, I mean, at that point also, this was hard to watch because now we know what happens. But I was really hoping that you would get to do. Were you hoping that you would get to do fire? I mean, obviously it would be better than the alternative, but out of the options.
So, I wore an outfit thinking I was going to make fire, which I was a bit annoyed about, because then I was wearing like Lorna Jane activewear for my exit instead of something cute. So I definitely thought that it was going to happen. In hindsight, I have said to Miles, thank you for not voting with me, because that just would have been an annihilation. Like, if I had have gone up against Kaylin or AJ, well, AJ maybe, he and I kind of joke, if we went against each other, we'd still be out there, like someone trying to get a spark, like 7 months later. Kaylin, we used to call him Dragon Breath. Like, he just would make a fire just by looking at the fire pit, basically. So, I mean, there was no way I was going to quit or not try. And I was hopeful that I would at least get a chance. But I was more incredibly frustrated that I couldn't get them to vote out Kaylin. That was what I was hoping would happen. But, yeah. And someone on Twitter or somewhere as well said at that Final Four, there were 4 of the postgraduates and 75% of them have made an incorrect decision, not just Zara. So whoever that random person is, thank you. 75% of us have made an incorrect decision, including me. So it wasn't just my decision at 4 that kind of drove all of this. But, yeah, in hindsight, I think it's probably a good thing I didn't have to make fire, because it would have been embarrassing.
Let's find out.
I mean, I can't speak. I've never tried making fire at all, so I think you wouldn't be alone there. When the votes were read and that third vote came out and it was your name, I mean, I was surprised as a viewer. Why you at this point? Have you been able to talk to AJ and to Kaylin and to Miles in terms of, like, why couldn't it have been Kaylin at this point?
So again, AJ and Kaylin were each other's number ones, and AJ thought that he needed Kaylin to take him through that final immunity challenge. So he thought that Kaylin was his best bet. Miles was very salty at me, I think, for what I did to him at 5. And I don't personally think he recovered from that. He disagrees with me. We always had that relationship where we would take hot shots at each other and then just very quickly recover and start working together again. It was always water under the bridge. I think he was much more stung at this point than I realized that he would have been. I was surprised that they voted me out, because I think both of them just had the intention that Kaylin would take them through. And Kaylin was of the belief that his game was so strong that he was going to beat either of the boys. So he was not concerned. I think it just came down to a friendship for him. And I genuinely think Kaylin was going to take AJ with him until that final day.
You ended up on the jury, and I have to say, you and Kate had my favorite finale outfits out of everyone. Loved it.
Yes.
When it came to selecting the winner between Kaylin and Miles, did you have an idea going into that decision of what you were going to do or who you wanted to represent your season, or was it sort of up in the air that entire time?
So I'm going to talk about this, which AJ hates. My final tribal council where I got voted out, and he said, JLP said, "What are you thinking tonight?" And AJ said, "Oh, I know how to write Zara's name down," or something like that. I was gutted that he did that to me. Like, I was so upset. I was like, this is the man that has been by my side for 45 days. He was my person out here, and I was very upset. I just felt like he was kicking me when I was down. So I hugged Miles and said to him as I was walking out, "It's you for me. I'm going to smooth your way over at the jury. I think you've played the best game, and I'm going to help." Like, that was my thought process there. To finish that off with AJ, I said, if the first thing he doesn't do when he walks out is apologize to me, we are done. And of course, he came over the little thing in jury, and I had to put a crown on his head. So I was like, and then
That was funny.
and then he turned to me and he said, "I'm so incredibly sorry that I did that to you." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'm fine then." And to his credit, when we were watching it, he was sitting next to me when he said that, and it was, it was an emotional time for both of us. It's not nice to see yourself, stabbing your friend in the back. It wasn't nice for him. It wasn't nice for me to have to watch it, but we are, besties for life now. So I mean, for me, those three boys, I had played alongside them the most. So for final tribal council, for my mind to be changed, like, I definitely went in not 100% sold on what I thought I was going to do, but it would have taken something incredibly dramatic for me to change my mind, because I'd seen it all. I'd been there. There was not really anything that they told me that I didn't already know. So, and I just think for Kaylin, he really needed to tell us something dramatically different to what he did. And I think he hasn't watched a lot. Well, I don't think he'd ever watched a final tribal council before.
No, he hadn't.
So, and I've listened to some of his exit interviews, and he said that he thought I wouldn't vote for Miles because Miles drank my coconut water on the last morning. Like, he was very much thinking about it in terms of friendships and who we sort of admired. And he'd obviously had this amazing challenge run. But you have to look at the people that were on our season as well. And that was a very stacked Brains jury. It was lots of women. And we all admired, like, amazing strategy and gameplay. So I just think Miles, for us, he's a great... Miles' actual story out there too, with all the struggles that he went through socially, it is so much more in depth than what you see. Like, he really grew out there. And again, I've seen a Reddit post that said that I almost look like I'm crying. I was so proud of him, like, when he was doing his tribal cow. I was sitting there like a proud mum, like nodding and like yes, and to everything he was saying, because I think that he really grew as a player when he was out there as well.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. I mean, like, to your credit as well, and the jury, like, I had said this. I could tell that the jury itself was going to be very level-headed in that sense, because the jury itself was full of game players who, when you look at the entire jury, you could see the moves that they'd made and shown that they had knowledge of the game. So I just wanted to say I really appreciated just you and the jury as well for being that kind of candid and able to look at it from that sense. I've got a question just in kind of the flip side of it. In terms of if you were to get to final tribal council, what do you think your resume would have been like? Because I obviously, like, viewers, we can see what we think it is, but if you were sat there, what do you think would be selling the jury? What do you think your main points would have been?
So I was going to talk about it first of all, I really, really desperately wanted to get there because I'm like a trained lawyer and I can argue until my heart is content. I was really excited to have a go at it. That was something I I just think it would have been so fun. I was going to talk about it in terms of 3 main points and then also talk about some things that I did not do well, because I think that's important too.
Yes.
The alley vote for me, right back at the beginning. So that was a massive moment for me that sort of got swept, up in everything. But we were with the Coven as far as the Coven knew. And when we had decided before going into that tribal council, this is the coming out party for the graduates. And you see Karen say in the tribal council, we're graduating today. Like she uses the wording over and over again. And so when Max decided to send Karen and Laura back to camp, and I was left there sort of by myself, just completely exposed, having made the decision to vote with the boys and vote Ali out, that was really big for me. And then I had to go back to camp as well and work out how I was going to handle that. And Miles said, just tell them that you didn't do that vote. And I said, there's just not that many people here. Like I don't feel like I can say that it wasn't me, because the only other person that it could have been is Logan, and no one's believing that she voted Ali out. So that was when I kind of harked back to Kara in Brains versus Brawn and was like, I'll just pretend that I made a mistake and that I didn't know what I was doing and that I got startled and all this sort of stuff. So that point, I think, and it was a move that I kind of had to make by myself. So I think that was a big point. Also, being swapped into a minority, and then that taking of that Laura's advantage, and then arguing my way through that mini final tribal council, as I'll call it, to get people who weren't my allies to send me back over to Brawn Beach to my allies. That was a huge moment for me. And that was also really important to my game, because AJ and Karen were divorcing over there. They were going through it, and I could see that on the mat. So that was another reason why, when Laura found that advantage, I really needed to get over there and smooth the graduates out. And then the final 5 move as well would have been the last thing that I spoke about. And then I was going to sort of talk to socially about how I could have been less blunt, and just in some of the challenges as well, and something, that I should have learned how to make fire better, and that I should have learned how to throw better, because it is an all-encompassing game, and I think it's important to talk about things that you didn't do well too. So I think Survivor's really interesting in that I went out there and I thought, I don't want to close a door to anyone, but I think too, that hurt me a little bit going from 8 down to 4, when the girls kept coming and trying to talk to me. And I was saying that I wasn't going to work with them, but sometimes that gets perceived as weakness when you're still listening, and you just have to potentially shut it down. So, yeah. And I will say Miles's final tribal council speech went for about 3 hours. So in the moment, maybe if I was up against him, I would have had to quickly start adding some extra things in as well.
Zara, it has been incredible to get to talk through your entire game with you. I mean, is there anything else that you wanted to share about your experience? Which, by the way, I completely thank you for reminding me about AJ's comment. I completely blocked it out from what happened. But I am very glad to hear that you two are at a better place, which is awesome. So yeah, anything else about your experience that you wanted to share before we close out?
No, I just think it was a really interesting experience to go through as a mother. My whole life, I guess, is spent facilitating everybody else, like kids and all that. And it was really interesting to go out there and have no one, and have to be Zara, like not, Huxley's mum or the twins' mum or George's wife. I just had to rely on myself and see, what I was made of. And that, I think, has been just invaluable to me. I think if there was a zombie apocalypse now, I'm completely confident that I could go through it by myself. Yeah, and I think too, talking about the preparation of Survivor, it took such a colossal effort for me to get out there, to organise my family for 2 months, thinking that you're going to be out there for that long, that, you know, that kind of explains why I couldn't throw and why I didn't, you know, I wasn't making fire down here in my garden every week, you know, every day leading up to it, because I was thinking about, oh my goodness, the twins have got book week in a month. I'm going to have to get them costumes and books. And like it really, to go and leave your life for that long is something, it's a massive undertaking. But yeah, I think, it's just been an amazing, life-changing experience, as they say.
Look, if you can get through those PTA meetings, you can get through Survivor just like that. So, Zara, thank you so much for joining Ollie and I. We appreciated your support during our recaps of this season, and we hope you know how much we adore you. Just wanted to congratulate you again on making it to the Final Four. As we said, especially an Australian Survivor, it is definitely not easy at all. So really just awesome job this season. And wanted to thank all of you who watched this video. We, of course, have more going on at Survivor Now podcast as well. But for now, we are going to end our interview here, and we will see you all another time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.